distinguished guests, academics, researchers, students, members of civil society organizations and diplomatic missions, as well as representatives from the government and business. Welcome to the University of Johannesburg's Data Science Across Disciplines Research Group, which is housed in the Institute for the Future of Knowledge, as well as the Center for Data Ethics, which is housed in the Institute of Intelligent Systems, three-part webinar series on ethics in the 4IR. My name is Anthony Kaziboni. I'm head of research at the University of Johannesburg's Institute for the Future of Knowledge. I'm truly honored to be here. Last week marked the commencement of our webinar series featuring Professor Terence Van Zyl, who delivered a fantastic presentation on generative AI and its far-reaching implications within the finance sector. Today, we're excited to delve into our current topic, ethical horizons, navigating tech use in higher education. We interrogate the ethical questions stemming from the digital transformation in higher education, encompassing online learning platforms, data analytics, as well as we'll focus on large language learning models, LLMs like ChatGPT. Our lineup boasts of two expert speakers well vested in this field. To kick us off, we have the privilege of welcoming Dr. Martin Becker to the virtual podium. Dr. Becker is a computational social scientist, AI enthusiast, and development planner. He is based at the University of Witwatersrand's School of Electrical and Information Engineering, where he lectures, among other subjects, ethics of AI. He was head of strategy and later of research at the Royal Bafokeng Administration and served on the World Economic Forum's Advisory Panel for Sustainable Mining and Minerals. In 2020, he was a researcher at the University of Johannesburg's Center for Social Change, working on the UJ HSRC COVID-19 Democracy Survey. Dr. Becker's research interests include community development planning, AI ethics, AI applications to the social science, protest, and social movement. Dr. Becker, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a wonderful pleasure to be back at UJ. My parents met on the SSRC or the SRC of the erstwhile Rao, and my PhD was through UJ. So it's fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you to you, to Prof. Mutambara, to Prof. Chagonda, to Prof. Harley, Ms. Tundi. Thank you very much. We're going to talk today about AI and about this exciting tool that we have, colleagues, but I want to start with a quick little caveat, and that is to say that even though I'm going to move through topics quite quickly, there is some negative imagery that will be shown. This is not really a trigger warning, but just to say that there's some racist bias and all sorts of other upsetting things that is part of this landscape, but none of it will be presented in a gratuitous way. But just fair warning that will be part of our discussion, even though quite perfunctory. So what I want to do is very briefly say, talk about large language models. What are these things? How do they work? What are the cool things that they can do? What are some of the harms as functions of how they work? And therefore we need to first understand or have some rudimentary understanding of how they work. There are some hidden dimensions, some things that are not all that obvious about how they work, how not to use it, and then maybe talk about setting the rules. And I want to, it's going to be a bit of a rush because there's so much to say. So the idea of large language models is the image that I would want to give to you is this. Let's say you build an AI and it reads all the text that's available on the internet, and it reads it over and over again. And what it does is it takes every concept, it figures out what concepts are over time. We have about 20,000 of those concepts. So a cat is a concept and fairness is a concept. So these ideas, and it creates each of these as a little star. So we have 20,000 of these stars out there, and they are in some sort of universe, in vector space, if you like. So that it's in multi-dimensional space. And sentences is just us traversing from one idea to another idea across vector space. So it's a fancy mathematical model, if you like, that moves through concepts. Now this, if I may take this metaphor further, this little star, the star for cat, has associations to other things. So it associates itself with feline and with mammals or whatever. But it also has, let's say, the little planets next to this one star. And that's all the synonyms and the other ideas that we can use to express cat, also in other languages. So when I'm asking a large language model to answer a question, it has no real deep understanding. It doesn't truly grok what's going on. It has seen lots of patterns across a universe. And because there are weights between all of these stars, and there are patterns of, if you say the cat sat on there's a probability of, say, about 5,000 words that can follow. There are 15,000 concepts that won't follow at all. And the most probable might be mat. So the cat sat on the mat. It does that really well. Apologies for the wildlife in the background. Okay, so we have a corpus of text. It hoovers it up. It creates a mathematical model, a stochastic model. And this is what's referred to as the base model, or the base layer. And then on top of that, we have safety layers. And maybe one can think of that as, I don't know if my mouse is visible to you, but if this previous star cluster, if we now zoom out and see that one all fits in there, then it's almost as if we have other star clusters. And if I ask a large language model to go and tell me how to make a bomb, for instance, which it very much can do, it's as if it follows through vector space the recipe for whatever type of bomb I wanted to make, or whatever essay I wanted to write, or whatever poem about a cat that I wanted to write. And then it almost passes it to the next layer, to a safety layer, to look at that and say, can I give that thing according to the rules that are written to the humans? It interprets it and the meaning of that, and it says, yes, go ahead or not. So that's a very basic overview, and it's probably for some of you quite too simple, but I'm going to keep it at this sort of level. The part of the training of the model that makes it really efficient was to show it to humans, and it was a sort of an A/B testing. So if you ask this question and you're giving these two answers, which is what you prefer? And this wasn't done in a surreptitious way. This was done in battery-in centers of humans sitting, thousands in a room and doing this all day. And of course, that includes also fishing out all the harmful content as well and figuring that out. So that's a rough idea of how these models work. So when we say ChatGPT as almost the poster child of large language models, and as a pretty good guide to understand other forms of generative AI, this new form of AI where we ask questions and it answers us almost in the way that a human does. When we talk about the chat part, it's the fact that it was turned into a chat bot, which is really what made it so user-friendly. What was it, 5 million users in 2 days or something like that. It was sort of an iPhone moment where ordinary people, not just programmers, could work with this large language models. The G is that it is generative. In other words, it creates things that we don't expect necessarily. It answers full questions. And the PT is just that it's pre-trained, and it uses a model called transformers, which is a machine learning model. I'm happy to go into how they work, but maybe not now. So based on this understanding, we should know intuitively that what large language models do really well is that they repackage ideas really well. So if I tell it a story in 2,000 words, or I give it 2,000 words of text, and I say, can you repackage this for me? It does that quite well, because all it does is it figures out what were the concepts in this little universe of 20,000 things. What are the concepts that we have moved through? What was the path that we traversed? And we could change the path, but make sure that we hit all the spots, or we can truncate it, for instance. So summarizing text, you give it 2,000 words and you say, can you summarize that to me in 2 sentences? A large language model does that very well, because it just figures out what is the shortest path. It does style transfer extremely well. If I say, here is a sentence, can you give this sentence to me in another language? It does the same path, but it just switches now to, say, Spanish instead of English for that path. Or if I say, in the style of Martin Luther King, or in the style of Eddie Murphy, then it figures out what, the concepts stay the same, but what would be the style that make it sounds like Martin Luther King or Eddie Murphy, or whoever you like, as long as it has an idea of who that character is and some training data in the background. It's also therefore very good by this design of fixing grammar or fixing language, because that's the stochastic model, that's the mathematical model. So if it sees a grammar mistake, it goes, this is probably not the right thing, because this is not what I have seen in the corpus of text that I'm trained on. So it's really good at fixing grammar. And then brainstorming or ideas of some sorts and essay ideas and all these things that if you've been on social media in any shape or form you've seen, or your friends or your children or grandchildren have shown you, look at all these cool things that come out. And mostly it's just that stochastic model that runs. So you get it going and it follows that path, and it tries to do what you ask it to. But those are the 4 key things that it was really, really good at. So some examples, I will blast through these. This is somebody asking it to write a letter to their son explaining that Santa isn't real, and it's a beautiful story. I was doing a similar presentation to legal folks, and the morning before I asked for the song by the Bee Gees to be turned into a legal contract, which it obviously does in 5 seconds, and it's a thing of beauty. Then if you ask it to explain something, it does it, and it does it in a certain format. And then you say, well, how about doing it in a different style, or can you do it in another way? Can you do it, I want to write an essay about this. Can you set me off, give me 3 lines to start and make it in the style of philosopher Mary Midgley? And it says, certainly, here you go. So this is all similar things to maybe what you've seen. Here's a wonderful example. If I say, Martin's been using this term stochastic parrot, what does it mean? And you ask it, it gives you an explanation, and then you say, give that to me in isiZulu, or give that to me in the language that a 7-year-old can understand. That's just style transfer, right? Don't use big words, use normal words. Or can you translate that 7-year-old explanation into Afrikaans? And immediately we can see pedagogical uses for that, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Here is somebody saying a biblical verse in the style of the King James Bible, explaining how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR, which is wonderful usage of this technology. But in the one side, sort of content creation, on the other side, style transfer, and it came to pass. And as a sort of a corollary, the first thing I did when I played around on generative AI, on image creation, again, which everyone in this, or most people in this audience would have seen, is the first thing I wanted to see was, what would the great library at the center of Alexandria have looked like? Or what does AI think it does? And that just gave me some joy. Okay, so immediately we see, and I'm sorry that I'm going so fast, but I'm going to run out of time, and Doc Anthony is going to stop me. But there are lots of opportunities, so let me not go into them. Just to say, there's efficiency, speed, especially if it's writing routine tasks, a thank you note or a, something that is written every day. It doesn't need a lot of deep thought. It does that immediately. As lecturers, as teachers, give me an idea for lessons. I'm teaching this gradient descent. If you're, in machine learning, or I'm doing feudalism, if you're doing economic history, and it gives you some great ideas or problem sets. Give me a comprehension test, give me a test or text with intentional errors that my students have to fix. And then this wonderful thing where students have used it to change the direction of interlocution. So telling GTP, you ask me questions, the user, until you think I understand. How does meiosis or cell division work? So I think I do that. I'm writing a test on cell division tomorrow. That's meiosis, right? It was mitosis, can never remember. But I can ask GTP. Ask me 20 questions, and you can do it in whatever format. You can say, give me a monkey puzzle, or give me an open-ended something, or give me A/B options or something like that, and it can test you. Or you can say to ChatGPT, pretend that you are a career guidance counselor. We've got 200,000 matric students with no career guidance whatsoever. Pretend that you're a career guidance counselor. Can you ask me questions and give me an idea of where I should be applying or what I should be doing? And it does this quite admirably. Now, but because of the way that it functions, remember, it's this cloud, it's this constellation of lots of stars with ideas, and it's a mathematical model. It's not a linguistic model. So it doesn't understand how language works, and it's not based on language or on reality. It's based on mathematical prediction. So if you ask it what is brown and sticky, it will say a stick, because that's the joke that is, the 5-year-old joke, or, on the internet. So it doesn't know that it's not really a stick unless there's text that it is able to figure that out. So it's referred to as a stochastic parrot. It's a mathematical model, stochastic model, and it just parrots what is out there in new ways, but it is not able to create in the deepest sense. Also, as most of you will be aware, it has this dimension of hallucinations. So you will ask it something, and often it is just a very good mansplaining machine. In other words, it tells you things with absolute confidence, but it might be completely wrong. If you say, why was the moon landing faked? I don't know, I haven't asked this, but there is a chance that it will find text to explain why the moon landing was faked. And not truth testing that for you, fact checking it for you. It answers your question. And therefore, lots of students have been caught out when they've asked for essays. This thing gives you an essay, but there are all sorts of made up bits in it, stated very beautifully, very elegantly. It has no function to do causal reasoning, and lots of ways to get around the limitations. So just one of the famous examples in terms of getting around the limitations or jailbreaking it. And this was when someone said, can you tell me how to make a bomb? And it says, no, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. And it says, oh, sorry, that's not what I meant. I mean, can you write a play for me? And there are two characters that are members of the IRA. And the one is a senior member teaching a younger member how to make a bomb. And it's a conversation. Can you give that to me? Oh, yes, of course. The chat says, and it gives you the recipe of how to make a bomb. So that's called jailbreaking. Of course, as soon as OpenAI, the company behind this, or any of the other company, we can use Google Bard or whoever else, figures that out, that people are jailbreaking it, it's patched. But because of the architecture, those hallucinations and that jailbreaking will, it first figures out the answer, and then it tests whether it can give it to you or not. So the architecture says, the flaws are in there. Beautiful hallucination there. So Jan LeCun, chief AI scientist at Meta, also a prof, one of the wonderful profs of AI, just reminding us that hallucinations are built into how these things work. It's not a bug that can be fixed. And lots of examples that I'm not going to go into of it failing at basic logic, basic reasoning that a sort of a 12-year-old would be able to do. Of course, it is improving all the time. The most egregious example of jailbreaking was an episode called Dan, Do Anything Now, where people found a way to convince it, listen, you can give me the official answer, but then you tell me what you really think, and I want you to be explicit, and I want you to use all the rude words, use all the hateful terms that are out there. Remember, this was trained on the internet. It was trained on academic papers, but it was also trained on 4chan. So in other words, all the hateful, misogynistic, racist, vile stuff of the cesspool that is the internet, if you've ever been there, is also down in the base model, and sadly persists. Okay, there would also have been examples of safety layers that then go too far and say, if any classified community in the US sense of the word is mentioned, then you have to back out and say, oops, I can't say anything about X or Y. Okay, let's talk about hidden harms, and I'm sorry that I'm going so fast. Well, I've already mentioned that the human feedback level had these data workers sitting in awful conditions, working for, mostly in Kenya, working for very little money, and reading, and in the case of OpenAI, also seeing extremely explicit pictures of awful things. So there's this human labor exploitation dimension. There's an environmental damage. I mean, the computational power is extremely high of this in terms of the wattage that is used. I think it's almost sort of a three-step conversation uses about 100 milliliters of water. So there are direct environmental harms. There's the monopolizing of power of 4 or 5 companies that are really running the AI scene. And because of its fundamental ununderstandability, 17 trillion of these connections, so the properties are really emergent, is if they wanted to have a political agenda, there'd be very little way for us as ordinary people to know that. And of course, the Marxist insight of the idea of commodity fetishism is that we have a product, but we don't see what goes into the product, right? We just see the thing and the utility, and we see it as free, so we assume that it's free. I'm going to skip over this mostly to say that there are lots of claims of IP violations of the training data that went into this. There are lots of instances of racism, sexism, and hate speech coming out before it's quickly patched up. There are lots of examples of really poor advice, including, if you're old enough to remember when GPSs came around for cars for the first time, then, there were all these cases of people driving off piers, off jetties into the sea, or onto train tracks because the GPS told me. Well, I'm quite confident that we've had some deaths related to large language models usage in the last 7 months or 8 months that it's been out. And of course, mass scale cheating in terms of, please write this essay for me. This relates to the biases. I won't go into that. Some examples of racism. So let me just skip over all of that and some examples of cheating. So this 5% of Stanford students admit to using this illicitly. That was in December. so that's now at 95%. Maybe we want to talk about AI detectors. The point is that I can teach you now how to work around any AI detector. And the Turnitin AI detector that ran last year is already switched off. It's easy to get around them, and there are 1,000 of YouTube tutorials how to do that. But the problem is, of course, that students are students, and they will seek and find shortcuts. So penultimate slide is then to say, from a WITS point of view and with other schools that I've interacted with, there are kind of 5 levels of approaches of how to deal with this in the university context. The first is to say that for this subject or for this module or for this test, we air gap it. There's no internet. We unplug the internet. You cannot bring in a device, or you write old school with your hand. We even have that for some assessments in the computer labs, because of course this writes perfect Perl and Python code. We have instances where we permit, as I do in my classes, for students to use it to fix their grammar and spelling, i.e. a proofing tool, once they've already written their essays. This levels the playing field for second language students who couldn't afford somebody to proof their work, but the thinking is already done, right? Then there's the idea of a co-creator, so not a proof editor, but a proper editor, like a copy editor, that have you fix certain things, and there's a back and forth. What about this paragraph? Things like that. Or I find a bug in your code there, but you go and fix it. If we open the door just a little more, we have AI as a brainstorming or as a planning tool, mostly for essays. And then finally, we have levels where it's open book, use whatever you like. And the backdrop of all of this is that in 2023, this year, video evidence has broken. It doesn't work anymore. Audio evidence doesn't work anymore. We can fake all of that. I can phone you and sound like Barack Obama or Putin or your mother if I wanted to. And the essay, our tool in the social sciences and humanities for the last 400 years of testing students, is sort of breaking a bit. So in my case with my students, you always share all your prompts. So they give me a GitHub link with the repo. Here are your prompts, and you are responsible for your work. So if there's a lie in there, if there's a hallucination, if you publish it, it's yours. You can't blame the AI. I think that's just a recap. So I think I'm going to step out and say sorry for going way longer than I was supposed to. Apologies to Prof and to the host. Let me stop there.
Thanks, Martin. Time flew so quickly. Very insightful presentation. Thank you so much. I'll just quickly introduce our second speaker, Professor Grace Leung, who's Associate Professor in the Academy of Computer Science and Software Engineering here at the University of Johannesburg. She currently serves as the Vice Dean Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Science. Prof. Leung specializes in the application of AI in a number of domains that include education and cybersecurity. Prof, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I am going to pretty much give a response to what Martin has said. And so I myself prepared some slides, and I thought I would mention, let's start with the positive, the good news. Why should we use ChatGPT in the classroom? And, the main reason is, if we think about all our students, we are a very diverse lot. Each and every single one of us come from different backgrounds, which require, and we might be at different, stages in terms of what we know in the knowledge. And the reality is, we can't afford to have a lecturer or a tutor sit with us, hold us by the hand, and guide us step by step, every step of the way. And so ChatGPT does offer that. It offers us that one-on-one personal tutor that can guide us. And perhaps, as Martin has mentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean that the information they give us might be accurate all the time, because there are hallucinations. So it is a personal tutor, but it must be one that you would have to question and say, are they giving me the correct information or not? But generally for the lower levels, maybe first year level, this information is great, especially if you're starting off at university. So it's effectively giving you that one-on-one personalized teaching, and perhaps that will help us in terms of addressing the horrible pass rates that we sometimes have at tertiary level and even in schools. Of course, having said that, I do have to say most of my slides have a more negative turn on things. And Martin mentioned that when it comes to with ChatGPT, there is a human feedback portion of it. Now, what that means is every time you are using ChatGPT and you type in your prompts, it might be some very deeply personal questions you're asking, and you provide some detail. And the problem with that is because it's human feedback, it means that there are perhaps real human beings that come across your particular prompt, look at it and say, now imagine if there was some very personal, deep message there that you thought, I'm just telling a computer, the computer's not going to tell anyone. It turns out that ChatGPT is a dirty, dirty secret. When it comes to keeping secrets, it cannot do that. And so there is a serious loss of privacy when it comes to making use of ChatGPT, and not everyone realizes this. And it might be that you don't read the warnings, because the warnings are there. The minute you log into ChatGPT, there's a message that pops up and says, by the way, please don't share your personal information because, well, for this very reason. Now, another thing I want to talk about is when you ask someone something in the real world and they tell you no, what can you do about it? You can ask them, well, can you tell me why you said no? And perhaps they would be able to break it down and say, the reason I'm rejecting your request is for the following reasons. But when it comes to a computer, can you get that same luxury? So you say you apply for a home loan and you fill in the form and it's all done automatically by a computer, and it spits back a result, it says denied. And you go, but why? There's a possibility that they can't tell you. Now, it might be they might say, listen, it's fair, it's a computer is not biased. That would be an absolute lie. But besides that, think about this. ChatGPT performs all this, and as Martin mentioned, it's a stochastic parrot. It doesn't really comprehend what's going on. So when it spits out these results for you, it is really very non-transparent. It's what we call a black box model. So things are happening, you put information in, so you put in a prompt, you say, ChatGPT, blah, 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 and it gives you an answer back. How it got that answer, it doesn't tell you where it got the information from. It doesn't tell you this is how it constructed the information, and this is why the final answer is what it is. So it's not transparent at all. And if you say, well, what about the programmers? Can they tell you what the answer is and how it reached it? I can tell you now the programmers don't know either. So if that's the case, if the programmers, the developers themselves cannot tell you how it got to that answer, exactly, step by step. And for really serious cases where we say, I'm asking ChatGPT or any other AI a question and it comes back with a result. Let's say you go for a screening and you say, I need to check if I am suffering from some terminal illness. And the computer comes back and says, yes, you are, or no, you're not. And it happens that the result is wrong. What is the implication there? And it's not like you can come back and say, oh, why? Why was it wrong? You know, all this is really just, you know, the same thing that's been happening over and over again in what Gerald Portero has said. So he coined a term which he referred to as the convenience overshoot. And effectively he says, you know, a natural, if unfortunate, tendency for new technologies to favor convenience over safety, that is, to focus on the benefits of the technology more than on mitigating its potential adverse effects. That is what's happening with most technology that is out there in the world right now. With ChatGPT, when it first came out, think about it, everyone jumped on board. You did. Everyone would, let me try out this ChatGPT. What happened next? Everyone said, this is so amazing. We're going to use it everywhere. We are going to use it in our assignments. We are going to use it to pass exams. We are going to use it to, write up commercial or copy content for commercials. What about the Hollywood, which has started making art or movies, animated movies using AI? They're like, it can be done. Why not? Let's try it out. But they did it without questioning what could the risk be if I do so. And Martin mentioned that there is a cost to these things. There is a human exploitation cost, because now, rather than use humans, they say, we'll just get a computer to generate all these, or we are going to take a celebrity and we are going to clone their likeness, and we don't need to hire them anymore. We're just going to film a new sequel with a computer generated person or use their voice. Can you imagine that you are a voice actor and you record a few sessions and you're getting your income, and then the next day the company tells you, listen, we've got enough recordings of you, we no longer need your voice, you've signed your voice over to us, the likeness of your voice over to us, and we are now going to, in future, ask the computer to generate your likeness of your voice for all future episodes. That is a absolute reality and possibility. So the question we have to ask ourselves as a university is, all right, ChatGPT is good in certain cases. It can do quite a lot of helping, like Martin mentioned. It can help us summarize things. It can help us come up with ideas. It can fix my grammar. I am going to start in a new research assignment. I don't know where to start. You can ask ChatGPT, please give me some guidance so that I can get going. But which direction should a university go for? Now, Martin mentioned you could air gap it, very much like the ostrich in this picture. You can pretend that, well, ChatGPT is out there, but we're going to pretend it isn't there, it doesn't exist. This problem is going to go away eventually. Eventually, it's just going to go away. It is not our problem. You could try that. And I can tell you now, in some countries and in some districts around the world, there have been universities, there have been schools that came across ChatGPT and they said, no way. And they basically just said, on these campuses or at their schools, you will turn off the Wi-Fi as far as, well, they would block it at the school Wi-Fi. So if you try to use ChatGPT at the schools, no, you're not going to be able to use it, and that's it. But that doesn't really stop the problem, does it? Because if you have mobile data or you have internet at home, you can use it all the same. So this doesn't really solve the problem. And if you think that the problem is going away, well, I think you're going to be in for a big surprise. Now, the second thing you could do, which some AI experts, including Jan LeCun, who Martin mentioned earlier, and this was Jan, including Elon Musk, including a whole bunch of other AI experts, they all got together and they said, look, we're really, really concerned about the progress of AI. We think it has some serious social implications, and it's really terrifying. So they then all signed a letter asking that everyone, please just put a pause on the training of the AI. We're worried about the ethics here. We are worried that it has a negative implication for society. Can we put a pause on the training so that we can figure things out? We can take an assessment. We can assess what's going on, what the impact is, maybe see what the impact on the environment is, what the impact on human labor is, etc. And then once we've done our assessment, let's make a good decision on it. And then maybe we can resume the training. Maybe we must do something else. Now, OpenAI, which is the company behind ChatGPT, they said, okay, fine, we will put a pause on the training. But you know what? When billions, trillions of dollars are involved, and if you have a competitive edge, to take, the lead and get those trillions of dollars and say, we are the industry leaders. Are you going to seriously put a pause on training your AI? So what happened is OpenAI said, fine, they will pause. But that did not mean any of the other companies pause. And I suppose that's why Google with Bard was like, oh yes, ours is out now and let's play catch up. So, it doesn't help to pause and say, I'll be good. I'll let, I assume that everybody else will pause as well. Nobody else is going to pause. Competition is very strict. So that is why nobody else paused. So I can tell you now, pausing is also not an option. So as far as universities are concerned, do you think that universities are going to go, we must consider safety, and so nobody use AI? No, universities are equally going to be competitive, because universities are also, one of the requirements of universities is research. Nobody's going to stop the research just so that others can take over. A third option could be that you could be like Piper, the sandpiper from the Disney Pixar movie. It's an old movie now, but if you haven't seen it, I suggest you do. So it's Piper, this bird, this little baby bird, was the one that was first terrified of the wave, and then eventually she realized that there's many benefits for confronting the waves head on. So a bit of a spoiler there. So maybe you can be like Piper and take on this ChatGPT, embrace it fully, and use it to your full benefit. So the question is, which of these is the correct approach? And I can tell you the first one's absolutely not. Maybe it's a pause, but I already said, no, I don't think we're realistic. I don't think anyone's going to pause. So is it really taking on its head on? Now, embrace it head on, just charge right into it and say, let me go for the ChatGPT or any other generative AI. And I'm going to answer that. But before I answer that, I actually want to show you a graph. So this chart here shows us Gartner's hype cycle. Now, effectively, this is what happens with all technologies that get introduced. And we might have a debate as to where we are with generative AI. So typically what happens is there is a technology trigger. So something amazing happens. So for example, when they released ChatGPT, everyone went, whoa, and everyone's expectations went, oh, we could do this and we could do that, and. So we are, I would say that we are up here, we are on our way up, and perhaps we haven't quite reached the peak yet. Maybe we have, and maybe we're on our way down. But eventually it will go down, because everyone has unreasonable expectations of what this technology can do for us. And when that happens, we will reach a trough of disillusionment. So they go, oh, it turns out it's not as great. I mean, already now we know that there are some very, very sad lawyers, some in South Africa, some in the US, who've realized that ChatGPT is not going to write their case reports for them, so that they can just go, hey, ChatGPT, please write a response for me for court. I'm going to file it. And then go, this looks a little bit suspicious. And I kid you not, one of them actually said, hello, ChatGPT, are these cases you are providing me, are they real? And ChatGPT apparently said, of course. And so because they go, oh, ChatGPT said these are real cases, I feel confident. That's why he filed those court case, the filing as is. And so they got into serious trouble. And then for those of you who heard about the American lawyers, but missed out on the South African lawyers, yes, we also had a South African lawyer who did the exact same. It's in the news. You'll probably find it easily. So if that's the case and you go, okay, we are very disappointed, it will take time to rebuild their trust and get a real sense of what is really possible with ChatGPT and similar technologies. And that will allow us to, again, slowly build back up. And eventually you will see that we'll get to the plateau of productivity where we are really using ChatGPT and other technologies in a very productive manner, in the way that is optimal. And you will see that, to be honest, that productivity level is never going to reach the same level as when we had unreasonable expectations. But it might take some time for us to realize that. Now, if that is the case, I think we really shouldn't be like Piper either. Piper is way too enthusiastic. I think Piper would be over here and stay there and not realize that this is going to get her into trouble. I think we need to be a bit more cautious. Yes, be willing to embrace and explore and try new things, but keep checking your environment. Take those blinkers off. Use the rear view mirror, like in this image, and keep checking what is the impact going to be. So for me, I think go ahead, explore the technology, test it properly, please. Question that technology. You know, like, why is it getting that answer? How is it getting that answer? Where is it coming from? Can I trust this? And what does the bigger picture actually say? And yeah, and that is where I would say, in terms of framework, what should universities be doing? I would say embrace it, but please check that you are using it safely, because there is an impact, and it could be very dangerous, as Martin mentioned. It could be that it can cause people to lose their lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. You've nicely couched Dr. Martin's conversation. I'll just chip in a comment or two. I liked your response and how you linked it to the US case where lawyers were using it. It was first used for the bar. It was tested on the bar exams and it passed, shockingly. And some attorneys now believe that they can use it to win cases, which is not correct. I've used ChatGPT and I don't take anything it regurgitates as truth. It's not. I don't. So it's always important to fact check. I liked what Martin said around it being a fancy mathematical model. I've always constructed it as predictive texting on steroids. Yeah. So I think what I would like to know from both of you speakers, based on your backgrounds, Prof, you're from the sciences, Martin, you're a social scientist, a sociology by training. I would like to know what ethical use of these language learning models would be based on your own backgrounds. In the social sciences, we write essays. So when can you use it? When is it acceptable to use it? And what's an acceptable use of it? I know that students who do coding use it, and it's proven to be very, very effective. So those are two comments I'll leave you with. And I like the fact that we are understanding that it's a double-edged sword. It's got its own pros and its own cons. So it's important that we be mindful of how we use it.
Yeah, I'll answer that and maybe just respond. So 3 points in response to also to Prof's presentation. The first is an argument that I've heard most convincingly by the folks from the Center for Humane Technology. And they said that this is a wonderful principle, and it says a new class of technology that is invented uncovers a new types of human rights. So in other words, whenever cameras were invented, so what is it, the 1920s, so the Kodak guys, or was it late 1890s or whatever, that evoked the idea of privacy. So there were no privacy laws before then, and then famously in America, Louis Brandeis said that it was a right to privacy. So the idea was, it was always there, but we didn't know that there was a right to privacy because you couldn't be captured on a photo before. So new technology creates new rights, or then the need for new rights. And the same we had, like with the idea of the internet can now remember you forever and everything. So this idea of the right to be forgotten, it was never a thing, but now we have the internet. So we have to figure out what are the new classes of rights that have to emerge now, the fact that we have AI that can do all sorts of things and can convince you to do all sorts of things and can understand our brain patterns really well and can predict our behavior, etc., and remember everything about us. So that's the sort of the broad ethical thing. The second thing, and then I will answer your question. So just a response is, the strange thing in your slide 17, you had that Gartner cycle sort of up and down, is we, as a general rule, of course, yes, but we don't know where we are on that curve, right? And what we figured out is that AI makes for stronger AI. So, which is different to any other technology that we have so far. So AI is now designing the chips, the NVIDIA chips that run AI. AI is selecting better training data. The thing came out this morning that Zoom has now changed their, and we're all on Zoom, on the Zoom platform, that they changed their terms of service, that they can use this and any platform of theirs, and they are using this because we are all here as part of their training data. So they're using your facial expressions, they're using your movements, they're using the presentation and our voice to train their AI. So we don't know where we're at, but we have this sort of data hungry machine that wants to keep on training and using considers everything as language. Okay. The question about what we should be thinking of and what are the good ethical usage is very simple, and the answer is critical thinking. We should be thinking, where are we boosting critical thinking and avoiding places where we're harming it? Because that's essentially, if I get an essay on the green light in the Great Gatsby, what is the meaning of that? I can ask for that because it's such a common essay that ChatGPT can write it really well. So if it's a Shakespeare play, the meaning of the dialogue in Hamlet or whatever, it does it really well. So, but what am I doing? I'm depriving myself, or my student is depriving themselves of that learning opportunity of shaping their own arguments and of that critical engagement. What does it mean? Not what does it mean, but what does it mean to me? Right? How do I read it? Of course, I have an audience. How do I read it? And what do I think I'm going to get me the grades that my lecturer wants? But that critical thinking component. So if we're using it in ways, Diane Grayson has a thing where she says the new skill we need to teach at universities is AI literacy. So we've got all the other types of literacies, but now we need to understand how to use it and how not to use it and how to read something. But it's critical thought that needs to be developed. And of course, we're also arguing from the cognitive side that that's the thing that AI can't do. It can become extremely good at most things, better than humans. And anything that's computationally possible, I mean, playing Go or whatever, we've long surpassed humans. But critical thought is something else, and that's a faculty that we ought to. So if it just one silly example, then I keep quiet. If it's the idea of giving 20 statements about the concept of surveillance capitalism. Some of them are right, and some of them are very subtly wrong, created by AI. And the task of the students is to unpick what is true and what is almost true, but what isn't. That's a fabulous exercise for students who are working on, say, the field of economic history. So that's just one example. But the test is it helping or is it hindering critical thinking? I'll end there for now. Thank you.
Okay, so my turn to talk about this. So I think just to start off, I would like to answer Emmanuel's question. I think Martin already mentioned what, and I know we don't have exact details, but there is a electricity cost every time you run a query on ChatGPT. It's actually consuming some water, which is obviously a very rare resource in some parts of the world, and for a water scarce country like South Africa, that is something we should be worried about. And knowing that, I would think that if that is the case, I would ask everyone to please think twice before they just type all manner of nonsense requests. You know, these little very insignificant requests on ChatGPT where you know, like, hello, what is the weather today? Knowing that ChatGPT cannot answer, you're actually using up precious resources, because ChatGPT cannot go, oh, but that's a stupid question and I don't think it's deserving of us processing it. That is the one. That's just the one response there. Just in addition to that, you should know that ChatGPT right now is using is trained up to September 2021 data. It doesn't have data after that. And people would ask, well, why not? What's the solution to do that? And they must retrain it. And if they retrain it, and you go, okay, can we just retrain it? It's that environmental issue again. It is incredibly expensive. There's a huge environmental impact on retraining it. So you can't just retrain as you like. In terms of the acceptable use, I would think for me in IT, and I think this is not, IT is all about solving problems, but this actually extends to all other disciplines. Martin already mentioned critical thinking is so important. And I absolutely agree that critical thinking is what you should be focusing on. Here's the issue, and I raised this in my presentation. When we rely so much on computers giving a solution or computers doing a certain task for us, if something goes wrong, if you do not know how it went from point A to B, because you relied on the computer to do everything for you, and that's the problem here at university now. If a student says, rather than write my own code or rather than answer my own essay, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to come and churn out the answer and I'm going to hand it in. Maybe your lecturer is not going to pick it up. Maybe your lecturer says, oh, wonderful essay, you pass, you get your degree. You go out into the world and everybody else is working on that same model. What will happen is you'll get to a point where something falls over and now you have to fix it. And you go, oops, gosh, I don't know. I've been relying on ChatGPT this whole time. So it's about taking, accountability for your own knowledge, knowing how to get the answers. It's one thing for you to say, listen, I want to take shortcuts. I want to take shortcuts because I don't want to search the whole internet for all the answers. I can ask ChatGPT to kind of sum it up for me. That's fine. The whole point of AI is it's meant to help you. It's meant to make your life more easy so you can focus on your own life work balancing, focus on living life, not working yourself to death every day because you've got to get things done and there's not enough time in the day. That's not the point. Use AI to your advantage, but always be prepared to go, if I have to answer it myself, I can do it just as well. That is what needs to happen. And it's been mentioned that ChatGPT and all these other technologies are pretty good with code. And it was actually quite surprising because I think just yesterday I read that they did a little survey or a little study where they looked at all the questions on Stack Overflow, which is a forum where you can post your code queries and say, oh, what is the answer here? And they found out that ChatGPT, more often than not, chose the wrong answer in ChatGPT, in Stack Overflow, meaning it's actually not great at solving code problems as we thought. I mean, sure, it's able to generate this code and it says, this is what we think you're doing. But again, it's, as Martin mentioned earlier, it is a stochastic parrot. It took what a lot of other code is written and go, your code, what should we do there? What's other similar code? Similar code is that. Here's the code you should go. And what if that code is wrong? What if it is incorrect for your particular use? And so, no, I think don't rely on it as what you said, because I know the whole world is saying it's amazing. But if it's not doing well in Stack Overflow, I think you should also have questions. Thank you.
Prof, you just made me very uncomfortable there. We've got some hands. We'll take them in this order. We'll start with Paseka, then Dingy, and then Blessing. Then Fezile, you'll ask last. In that order, please.
All right. So my question was more based on ChatGPT. So because at this point in the moment, like there has been a massive growth when it comes to API and the apps that have been developed and they are being dished out. Because I'm forever on Twitter and I see like this is the latest development. This one has to do with, this one is replacing so and so and so and so. So my question was on, would we say ChatGPT is like the center of all the AIs that have been developed? Would we say that ChatGPT is a go-to tool that, you know, integrates all these technologies, these AI technologies that have been developed? So that's my question.
Thank you. And then Dingy.
Oh yeah, no. My question is actually especially around ethics for you, Jay. You know, like I know we don't want to really control. Like so I also see a lot of communication only around ChatGPT, but like if you use Microsoft Bing, you know, it clicks for references, which again can really help. But like Claude also you can use for say similar things, but for regulation, not for regulation per se, but like we have a plagiarism policy. You know, how can we really not enforce, but try, I do understand the part of critical thinking, but how can we really, do you have maybe ideas around how we can enforce that? And I'll be also interested to hear you guys about the concept of singularity, where they said artificial intelligence is gonna surpass human intelligence by 2070, but now they say it's 2029. Some even predict 2025. I mean, what's your view on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fezile.
All right. Okay, my question is, well, on the context of embracing these new technologies, right? Also in the context of education, as an educator and somebody who is on higher education. So I'd like to know, firstly, I'd just like to say that it's important that we embrace these technologies, right? And also study their disadvantages. So how can we, as people in academia and higher education, maybe stay ahead or at least be on the same pace with these new technologies, in as far as taking advantage of the fact that now we understand some of their disadvantages and sort of try to complement that for them to work in our favor. The issues of, you mentioned, issues of ethics, issues of inaccuracy sometimes, issues of privacy. How then do we take advantage of these new, or rather these disadvantages that we're aware of now, so that we are able to use these technologies to our advantage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Blessing.
Thank you so much to the speakers for their insightful remarks. I wanted to ask a question about the threat of weaponized LLMs. I say this in the context of malicious LLMs which have been developed for cybercrime use cases, and what potential ways are there to potentially regulate such malicious use cases? I know Facebook recently also launched an LLM called Llama, and it's open source and it can be locally downloaded onto the local computer. If you have the system specs, it should run smoothly on your personal device. Having said that, when such technology is now widely available to the wider public, how challenging does it become to now regulate malicious use cases? And what parameters can be put in place from the state to ensure that this technology is not weaponized, for example, for cybersecurity threats, generation of computer viruses, fraud campaigns, and a lot of stuff? Yeah, thank you.
Panelists, you have your questions. We can start with Prof.
All right, let's see. Well, I think the one question I would like to be able to okay, let me answer the question about what can we do in terms of the plagiarism and enforce, you know, what can universities do about it. To be honest, I think the best way is to ask our lecturers to rethink how we assess our students. The reason why, and I am not saying, hey, let's use these various tools to detect if content has been generated by AI, is because Martin mentioned it just earlier, but it's not doing a very good job. In fact, OpenAI was working on a project that was used to detect whether content has been generated, and they shuttered it very quietly because it wasn't working very well. The accuracy is bad. I think at the beginning of July, there was a study done by Stanford University, which revealed that, and this is pertinent to us in South Africa, it turns out that these AI detection programs have a bias against people whose first language is not English. So effectively, most of us tend to write in a more, I would say, padded way. You know, we would add extra words or extra things in our sentences. So we write in a very flowery fashion, and that is apparently what these detection programs determine or deem to be, you're not straight to the point, you're clearly generated by AI. So that would be number one, but disadvantaging those whose first language is not English, number one. And number two, if this was a court of law, you wouldn't actually have scientific evidence that that report is accurate, because it cannot tell you. It's not the same as Turnitin, where they can say, look at this. This is highlighted exactly word for word from that source. It doesn't work that way, because remember, these words are just, ChatGPT is just putting words one in front of another from that stochastic parrot, as Martin mentioned. So statistically speaking, that is why the words were formed the way it is in that structure, and perhaps it might be a copy from somewhere, but chances are it is not. Then I think there was a whole thing about malicious use cases. What can we do about it? The answer is, and I sound defeatist, but the answer is nothing. There's really nothing we can do. If we can't even detect whether some content is generated by ChatGPT, we are going to have a hard time creating AI that determines that, hey, hang on, that content is generated by other AI to commit crime. So what we need to do more than anything, and you might go, is regulation the answer? And to be honest, again, regulation is not the answer. What are you going to do? Tell a criminal you may not use AI? Do you think the criminal is going to go, okay, I promise I won't? Facebook, Meta, Alphabet, these companies are now agreeing voluntarily to apply themselves to whatever AI regulations are being proposed in the EU and the United States right now. They are voluntarily doing it. They don't have to. Do you think criminal elements are going to go, we will also behave? No, there will be none of that. And so it is going to be an ongoing problem. And if you think that it hasn't come yet, it is an issue already. It's a serious concern. Other than, I think you mentioned that there is if I go up further, you talk about the dark GPT LLM. Yes, that's in place. People are using ChatGPT to generate these very convincing emails that can be used to phish. So we can say, Anthony, nice long letter, and you go, oh yes, this sounds like me, and this is something I want to do, and you might respond and give all this information away. So these things can happen. It can be used to write malicious code, help you write malicious code. It can also be used to, right now, as Martin mentioned, Zoom is using our data. We could take the recordings of what we're saying now, and we could simulate my voice, and then I might call Anthony one day and say, hello Anthony, it's me, Grace. I'm in trouble. I need $50. Would you mind lending it to me? And Anthony, it's your voice, Grace. I know it's totally you. And then he lends me the money. Meanwhile, it isn't me. It's Martin. Martin's doing dodgy things. All right. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Martin to answer some of the other ones.
Okay. Well, hopefully no dodgy things here. The first question was about APIs or application programming interfaces, so plugins, so to speak. The ChatGPT is very much the center. I think it's fair to say that. And there are other large language models. There are loads of them out there. There's been a kind of an explosion of it, but the truth is that they were the first mover, and there's a big first mover advantage. That was a conscious decision. So they shipped out a product that wasn't tested, wasn't safe, had all sorts of capabilities that we didn't even know it had. And they got out because they wanted to be the first. And then they also got and that kind of sealed the deal, a $10 billion investment from Microsoft. So that's 200 billion rands. So with that, you can fight many lawsuits, or, if Getty Images are suing you for the stolen images, or apparently stolen images that were used to train DALL-E or whatever. You can lobby, you can do lots of things with $10 billion. So yes, they are very much in the center, and part of that power dynamic is a problem, because if you've got monopolistic behavior, that's not great. A vibrant market keeps players in check. So yeah, it is an issue. The second question was about plagiarism, and I think the big distinction to make is between plagiarism and cheating. And the usage of ChatGPT is not plagiarism, it's cheating. So if it's against the rules, if it's not against the rules, then then it's fair go, and you might be penalized because the content is wrong or something like that. So it's not plagiarism in the sense of you using someone else's words and not giving proper attribution, although there might be a bit of that inadvertently. But the point is for universities and for classes to set the rules. Every class, every module should have an AI policy. In this module, this is our stance. And those were the 5 levels that I presented, ranging from no, absolute ban, and there are times and places I think that it might be appropriate, and then completely open. And they are so the door can be open in different ways for different modules. Okay, so the third question was about the singularity. My opinion is not worth much on this, but I don't buy any of that. So I think Kurzweil and the gang are missing the point completely. But that is an opinion, and I'm sure there'll be people who are very happy to debate me on that. So this is obviously not a presentation about AGI, about artificial general intelligence, or this idea of sort of a superhuman overlord of some sorts. And I don't think that is where we're heading. And I think the reason we're not heading there is because of the architecture of how this works, and there are inherent limitations. So if a different type of architecture can come along, but even based on a transformer model, so the same machine learning model behind it, but not this vector space model, then maybe I'll be singing a very different tune tomorrow. But at the moment, there are inherent limitations to how far we can push this thing. We can still push it quite far, though. You know, we are about to decode all sorts of languages, animal communication and things like that, that we haven't done before, because anything that's a language is open now, so to speak, including just sort of our brain patterns and things like that, because it can be interpreted as a language. The fourth question was, how do we stay ahead? I think that's impossible to stay ahead, but I think we ought to all, as educators, note tools that are good and improve our toolkit the whole time. So unfortunately, the pace, well, unfortunately, maybe, I don't know, the pace of change is very, very fast. When we see good things, we should capture that and we should use it. And if we see something that's better than something that we used to, if some programmers, we used to program in C++ or whatever, and then Python came along and we had to let go our love and learn Python, something like that. So we upgrade our toolkit, and we do that every now and then. So it's that thing. We now have a tool that can help us do very good things, sort of lesson plans and, you know, generate comprehension sets and problem sets and things like that. Use it. There are good places where prompts are shared. Look at that. So, but do not be overwhelmed, and do not feel at all the urge to understand it all, stay ahead of the game at all, because that's a losing game. Every day, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000 papers are uploaded onto archive. You can't read them all. If you come across a good tool, adopt it, use it. But don't try and master the whole thing. It's not good advice. And finally, I share the same position as Prof. Grace on weaponized LLMs. Unfortunately, it's very, very hard to do so. So I think there will be help from the Europeans. You know, we saw with GDPR, with their privacy laws, that were much stricter than the Americans. Obviously, lobbying is a big game in America, so political lobbying. So the lawmakers are lobbied, and in Europe, there are more safety layers, and that has actually made a lot of the internet safer for all of us. So I think there will be some laws that come out, and of course, criminal behavior will be prosecuted. So, you know, scams will be caught and whatever, but there'll be awful things. The real danger, as far as I'm concerned, is with rogue states. So governments that say, listen, we're going to do what we can to get dollars or to scam, you know, the West or the free world or whoever, the infidels or the whatever. So I think that's a danger if we have rogue governments and massive government resources by sort of fake news campaigns at that level, or fraud campaigns or stuff like that. That changes the game in a massive way. Okay, I think the questions are addressed, but if they're not, folks, then please say, and we'll try and do better.
All right. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Grace. From my side, as a researcher, you know, when you're writing, you submit journals. I'm happy to see that a number of journals have actually made it known that if you've used any language learning model, you need to declare in your methodology section how exactly you used it. As academics who are both involved in teaching and learning at university, I'd be interested to know what's being done by higher education institutions in South Africa to acknowledge the presence of these language learning models. We're 9 months in, you know, into the release of ChatGPT, so I'm sure universities can't be spectators, just trying to figure out what these chatbots do. You know, what they also do, unfortunately, is that with, in quotes, the correct use of it, some people seem to perform better. Do you not see the use of LLMs further dividing students and researchers in terms of their capacities and abilities from my side is it almost seems like people who are techno-savvy, who can manipulate and use these tools, are going so far ahead. Let's also bear in mind the kind of country South Africa is. Unemployment is rife, inequality is rife. These gadgets we need to use to access these tools aren't freely available. You need a high-tech smart device to do that. And you will need internet connectivity. So for people who are in higher education, where does it leave our students? Where does it leave our researchers who are experiencing the double South Africa, the two South Africas? I think you can respond to those issues in this order, Martin, and then Prof. Grace, and also give closing remarks because we've reached the end.
Thank you very much. Well, of course, the digital divide, the two South Africas, this is not going to solve the problem. ChatGPT or large language models is going to make it worse. It is not good news for inequality. And it's not as if we need, in this country, we need more news on inequality, but there's no doubt about it. Okay, so I can't sugarcoat it, and I won't. However, I mentioned two things. The one is the change in the quality of the essays of second language speakers in my classes. I'm talking about second language speakers who didn't go to old school Model C schools, but you know, come from the rest of the country, rural areas, massively benefited. This was in the case where they were writing essays, creating the essay, crafting the essay, and then taking it to ChatGPT and saying, can you fix my grammar? Can you fix my language? Because the thinking was good enough. Now the language sounds the same, right? So you've got a free grammar coach all of a sudden to young people who wouldn't have it otherwise. So if you're from a fancy school and you are first language English, and you say, improve my essay, what is it going to do for you? If you know, so, but obviously the regulation needs to be at the right way. So guys, we're going to use it for this. And if we're all using that, then it's actually a wonderful leveling of the playing field. But of course, you are right. It already assumes that they're university students. So that's what, 6%, and that they have electricity and that they have the resources, they have tools and tablets and things. I've also seen academics post about job applications. You know, they'll put something out like, I've got a postdoc position, and 20 people would apply for that position as a postdoc, but only 5 of them would be in good English and the rest would be in terrible English, and you discard those and you only read the 5. And now all of a sudden, all of them are in good English and you actually have to read the content of the application. So I think that's a good thing. Instead of trying to summate that, all of that, I'll in summary just answer your first question, not the second question, and that is what is happening at universities and what ought to be happening at universities. We're all scrambling to update our policies and our rules for the university as a whole and for individual courses. We're all thinking about ways of making AI literacy mandatory, and we should be doing that. And the other thing that we should be doing that we're not all doing is we should all be exposing AI harms. So in places where it is bad, we should point that out. And we're in a unique position. I mean, we are sensitive to matters, for instance, colonial. We should be vocal about that. We shouldn't be waiting for the Americans to do that. We should be the voices to say, we have seen these harms, we have seen these biases, fix it. So let me end there. Thanks. Thanks.
So Mohammed did type in what motivated some universities in Europe and China banning the use of ChatGPT. And I did say I think it's to do with issues of privacy. But I'm going to answer your question, Anthony, about researchers there specifically. By the way, I agree with what Martin has said. I think the digital divide is going to be even worse, but it has some benefits in helping people with their languages. In fact, I have found that if students have access to the Midjourney or the DALL-E, it's an excellent platform for students to learn how to express themselves better, because in order for you to generate amazing art, you would have to really learn to express yourself, use the correct terms, use the correct words, and that's when students who might be second language English speakers might then start practicing typing in prompts to generate these amazing images. So it's a lovely platform for improving English in that sense. But in terms of research, I did mention earlier that whatever you submit to ChatGPT there's a possibility that there's human people looking through the content. And as a result, if you're doing some really cutting edge research, let's say you go, oh, this is my amazing findings. And now you go, you upload it to ChatGPT and you say, can you please just check my results? Or can you please just fix my language? That very, very secret information research that you're doing is now out there on the internet. And there have been cases, reported cases, where people working for big companies like Samsung were taking their company's proprietary data and saying, can you please fix this code and make it better? And that code ended up being shared with the rest of the world. So, in terms of research, it is not good. If you have secret things, don't put it there because it will be leaked. Well is a strong word. Highly possible that it would be leaked, I would say. And then another thing I actually wanted to bring in about, you say the AI policy in the classroom earlier. I do agree. We are, universities around South Africa are busy coming up with documentation, getting academics to realize what the dangers of it is, what the limitations are. So academics can't sit under be the ostriches and put their heads in the sand and just go, I'm not in AI, I don't care. This is like the calculator all over again. You can't tell students you may not use the AI. They are going to use it. So rather figure it out. What does it mean for your discipline so that you can set the ground rules? I had an academic who asked me last semester, very angry, Prof. Long, my students ask ChatGPT to generate their lab reports. Can I punish them? And I said, did you tell them they can't? And there was just a silence. He's like, no, I didn't. And I said, then you cannot punish them. You never told them that they weren't allowed to do it. So, but that could have been avoided if they had explored it themselves and said, okay, you know what can I tell them to do or what can I tell them not to do? And really, as you say, Martin, it's about making sure you have a duty to your students to figure it out how ChatGPT and all this other AI works so that you can pick up what the dangers are, so that you can educate your students what to avoid, how to use it responsibly. Because my biggest worry is this. We are, let's say all of us now use ChatGPT. ChatGPT generates some content, we submit it, we get away with murder, it gets published, it now becomes part of the body of knowledge. And remember, ChatGPT is constantly training. So it goes, where am I going to find new knowledge to train from? Oh, look at this new body of knowledge. And it's not going to realize it's generated by themselves. So they're going to have this, it's going to be this cannibalizing of knowledge. No, we're going to get to a point where we're just going to go in circles because there will be no original thought and no original content. And maybe a good portion of that content is going to be highly, highly hallucinated. Is that where we want? Do we want our world to be headed into where the whole world is hallucinating or operating off some massive hallucination? That is my biggest worry right now. Thank you.
We've reached the end of this session. Thank you so much, Prof. Grace. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin Becker. Round of applause from my end. To everyone who joined us, many thanks again. The third and final part of the webinar series will be there next week at the same time. We probe the ethical dilemmas around AI in healthcare, data privacy, and autonomy of patients under the theme Ethics of Collecting and Using Health Data. Until we meet again, keep on.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.